The Real Yellow Pages, Comerica Bank, Farmers Insurance, and Just Tires. Now live from Morton's The Steakhouse in Woodland Hills, here are Mychal Thompson, Mark Willard, and Dodgers legend Steve Garvey.
And of course, it's all brought to you by Farmers Insurance. The kind staff here at Morton's The Steakhouse has taken care of the lunch. Steve Garvey has taken care of the legend. He joins us on stage right now for our special Lunch with a Legend broadcast. The Dodger great, Dodger employee, potentially future Dodger owner. We're going to talk about all of that as we welcome you back in. LA Sports Leader, 710 ESPN. Great to have you up here today. How's everything?
Oh, great to be with you. Drove in from the desert, live out in Palm Desert. 2 days in a row now, back to the homeland, I always say. But did you see that heckler out in the audience? Did we get security?
I see some people in Dodger gear.
Yeah, that Jay Johnstone was out in the audience.
That's right.
Yeah,
he did.
It'd
be nice if he would speak up during the broadcast and say maybe he'll throw some croutons at us or something like that.
One of only two guys that ever wore a groundskeeper uniform, and he and Jerry Rice.
Wait, now you're going to now you have to tell the story.
Yeah. Okay. It was late August. Down by a run. Back then, you only drug the infield in the fifth inning. So we were struggling, lost 5 out of 6, and I'm sitting in there, ready for the bottom of the fifth inning. And I look out, and all of a sudden there's a guy 6'5" that's dragging the infield with another guy that looks vaguely familiar. And what Royce and Johnstone did was they went and put on these groundskeeper uniforms and were dragging the infield. So by the time they got to second base, the fans started to realize it was them. And there was this groundswell of noise and screaming and yelling and so forth. And, of course, by the time they got to the foul line, Lasorda was yelling at them, and what are you doing? Get back in uniform and all that. So they finally come back into to the dugout. And Lasorda said, both of you guys are fined, $1,500 apiece. So we're all laughing. I mean, whoever did this, right? But they did it for a reason. They were always doing pranks and jokes to keep us loose. And so lo and behold, bottom of the 8th inning, score was tied. And who gets up with 2 outs? But Johnstone hits the first pitch for a home run. We win 4-3. So the next morning, of course, it was in the papers, Rick Dees, and of course he had great show and great reach, decides that he wants to raise money to take care of the fines and ends up raising $11,000. Which eventually went to charity. So a great skit, one time ever in history, 2 players went out and were dragging the infield, ended up raising $11,000 for charity.
So the lesson
that was with the good old days.
Yeah, the lesson is on your time off in baseball, you should mess around a little bit. Sometimes it can end up being a good thing.
Absolutely.
So much baseball stuff to go through with you, but the first thing that I thought of when I thought, I'm going to be sitting down with Steve Garvey, I want to know how one of the most famous Michigan State athletes was thinking when the Hail Mary was caught last Saturday.
Well, I was in the process of my 3rd Hail Mary. I was saying at the time when the ball went up. I had just gotten home, finally have 2 sons after 5 daughters, and Sean Fitzpatrick, he's 13, the leprechaun. We had been in a tournament. And I was there for the next to last play, and all of a sudden I said, well, it's got to be a Hail Mary, last chance. Doesn't happen, scores tied, overtime. And as has been the season for the Spartans, beating Ohio State, beating Michigan, and when the ball goes up, and if you had seen the play, one of their best receivers never touches it, goes off his face mask right to this quarterback who becomes a receiver. He has the presence to take it and move forward. The nose goes over the line, and eventually instant replay says it's a touchdown for the Spartans. So, I mean, we were ecstatic. We only replayed it about 15 times since then.
Right. And since we're talking about Michigan State, another great Michigan State alum, Kirk Gibson, is now the manager of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Did you see this coming in him when he was a player, that he was going to be this good of a manager?
I never saw him as a manager. I always knew he'd be a coach. I always knew he'd be the hands-on kind of coach that would be in charge of attitude because he always had that football mentality. But he's done a great job of taking probably 6-7 years of coaching experience and getting his opportunity and changing the real focus amongst the players in the dugout and in the clubhouse to one that was distracted, a bunch of guys going up there and just swinging freely and leading the league in strikeouts and maybe home runs, but never winning, to a team that now does some little things and incorporates a little more of a mentality of let's go the other way in situations and give in to the pitcher. And I thought he did a great job. Arguably the manager of the year.
Now, why didn't you get into managing? Because you had this like real calm demeanor. It kind of reminded me of a little bit of a Joe Torre type manager. Did anybody ever ask you for managing, or you ever wanted to pursue it?
Well, ironically, through the years, when people would say that, I'd look at them and say, I'd rather own.
Well, of course.
Better job security.
Yeah, that's for sure. Everybody, every ex-player would rather do that.
But I always thought maybe one shot, taking a team and trying to do it the way that I was taught from the Brooklyn Dodger management style, back in the 60s. I don't know if many of you know the real story of me growing up in Tampa, Florida. And at the age of 7, my dad was a Greyhound bus driver, and he comes home in late March, and he sits down at the dinner table, and he says, do you want to skip school? Wow, thanks, Dad, sure. What are we going to do? He said, well, I have a charter tomorrow to pick up the Brooklyn Dodgers from the airport and take them to St. Petersburg to play the Yankees in an exhibition game, and I think it might be a great father and son day. So the next day, we pick up the bus, we drive to the tarmac. About 8:30 in the morning, the K. O'Malley 1 lands, which was the Dodger plane, only team in baseball to have their own plane. And it taxis up, and there was no concourses. They pushed the ramp up, and the door opens, and off comes Walter Alston and Pee Wee Reese and Gil Hodges and Snyder and Ferrillo and Robinson and the great book, Boys of Summer. These were the Boys of Summer. So I got a chance to bat boy that day. Almost sat on the lap of Jackie Robinson and had Pee Wee Reese ruffle my hair and Gil Hodges play catch. And that day was the greatest day of my young life. And for 6 or 7 years after that, they liked my dad so much, they would request him, and I would bat boy for 2 or 3 times each spring. And that was the transition time from Brooklyn to LA. So I actually grew up with my idols, and then 1968 I get drafted in the first round.
Little did they know they were hanging out with who would one day be the great Steve Garvey, joining us right now. Lunch with a Legend on 710 ESPN. When you think back to the highlighted moments of your career, MVP, won a World Series, the Iron Man numbers, which part of all that is the closest and the most special to you?
Well, I think because you play a team sport, the most important thing is a world championship. All your individual achievements lead up to your position and your responsibility on a team. And then ultimately, you get a chance to make it to the World Series, and then we're denied in 74 and 77 and 78. We were upset each time. Don't you all believe that? Sounds good, doesn't it? And then finally, in what arguably was our most difficult year, 81, with the strike and a lockout and a half a season, we end up having to play Houston in a 2 out of 3, and then Montreal and Rick Mundy's great home run in Game 5, and then we lose the first 2 games to the Yankees, and then come back home and have 3 great games and end up winning. And I will always remember with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning and I think 6-7 run lead, seeing the ball go up to Kenny Landreau in center field and thinking to myself, this is it. This is the boyhood dream come true. This is what we played hard for. Time was running out on this group, the infield and Monday and Smith and everybody else. And as soon as he catches it, it's the obligatory run to the mound and, jump on the pitcher.
Pile on, right.
But there's a great picture. It's in Sports Illustrated, and there's one at Dodger Stadium that's probably 10 by 12. And it has Steve Yeager picking up Steve Howe, and I'm 10 or 12 inches in the air over them. So number 1, it proved I can jump. And number 2, it's such a great shot, but what you don't see, unless you watch Sports Classic, is in the next 5 seconds, I come down, Yeager comes down with Howe, spins him around, Howe clocks me with an elbow in the chin. My hair goes out of place for the first time. Right, Jay? First time you ever... Hat goes flying. And fortunately, I could take a punch, I guess, to prove that, or I would have been knocked out on the pitcher's mound at Yankee Stadium in the highlight of my career, World Championship. So.
Steve Garvey said moments ago that he would rather own than manage because it's better job security. I think the Dodger manager right now has better job security than the current owner. Let's discuss some of that coming up next. Steve Garvey, our Lunch with a Legend broadcast with Mychal Thompson. I'm Mark Willard. Back in a moment, 710 ESPN.
The world's greatest performance. 710 ESPN's Lunch with a Legend continues right now.
All right, back at the Lunch with a Legend broadcast with Steve Garvey, Morton's East Steakhouse, Woodland Hills, with Mychal Thompson. I'm Mark Willard, going through the life, the career, the current situation of Steve Garvey, Dodger great. There's no use in dancing around this. It's been a heck of an interesting year, or even two, some would say, with the Dodgers and their current ownership situation. You were working with that group at one time earlier this year. We'll ask it this way. How does Frank McCourt and everything that's gone on make you feel?
Well, I think everybody has a pretty deep understanding of the last 2 years. It's been covered, it's been chronicled. You guys report on it almost on a daily basis. The team's in bankruptcy. It's gotten to that point. Who would have ever thought this great franchise, one of arguably the two best histories in all of sports, would get into this position? But it is. 2.5 years ago, I started to put together a group that I thought, what do I do best? Well, I published magazines, I produced radio and television, I worked for large media companies, and I played a little baseball for 20 years. So why don't we look at acquiring sports franchises? Well, we start to put it together, and all of a sudden, divorce happens, disclosure, the team starts to build momentum in the wrong direction. All of a sudden, trust is lost. There's an anticipation that there may be owner change. One thing leads to another, goes into bankruptcy, and now it's in the hands of the bankruptcy judge. Our philosophy has always been that, along with myself, Oral Hershiser's joined our group, a handful of other businessmen and women from Southern California. We feel that we can make a difference if and when the club goes on the market. We feel that this city, that Southern California, all the Dodger fans around the country, need to know that their Dodger franchise is in good hands, that they can come home to Dodger Stadium, that they can trust ownership because they know ownership has been on the field before, has led them to world championships. Oral and I are young enough, thank the Lord, to be able to go into the front office and put together a team that will run the organization for many years to come the way it should be run. A championship team will be put on the field. You'll feel very secure when you go to Dodger Stadium. The atmosphere will change from what you've seen this year. It will be Dodgers buying Dodgers if we get the opportunity. So, we want the fans, and the fans have always been the face of the franchise. The fans and the players that have created history that you've known and you fell in love with, that are on the field sweating and bleeding and giving all of their efforts, because the Dodger franchise was always about unity, about we. It was about Branch Rickey one day deciding that Jackie Robinson was going to break the color barrier. It's been through the years a transition of players who understood there was a Dodger way to play the game and a Dodger way off the field to treat the fans and let them know that they were very, very important. So that's our philosophy, and if and when that situation comes up, we'll be ready. It's obviously going to be a very interesting process. We have somebody at the court in Delaware every day, and we'll just sit and wait. There's an old saying, you can control what you control, and don't worry about the things that are out of your hands, and that's what we're doing right now.
Well, when you sit down and do the math, and we're just simple people here. I'm just a simple person. I look at what the team's value is, the real estate it sits on, and the debt that Frank McCourt has incurred over the years. Where are you going to get $1.5 billion? You and Jay Johnstone are going to get $1.5 billion from. I figure that's what it's going to cost to get the Dodgers, right, from Frank McCourt.
1.5?
Well, at least the 1.5. I figure the team's worth $1 billion. Debt's probably about $300 million, and the real estate's at least about $200 million, right? So where are you going to get all this money from? Who's your sugar daddy?
Well,
is it Jay Johnstone?
That's right. He's unassuming, but
yeah. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Well, the team was. Let's say if the team was purchased for around $435.
Yeah, okay. But that's gone up, way up since then.
Well, it was.
We're talking about the LA. We're talking about the LA Dodgers, not the Kansas City Royals. Here.
Absolutely. Disregard any future contracts. Mm-hmm. The team lost the highest percentage of attendance in any team in baseball last year. The stadium's going to be 50 years old. When you factor all those things and you take a reputable company and institution like Forbes, they value the team in and around $750 to maybe $820. Mm-hmm. So how can you actually, and until you look at the books until you know exactly how much debt there is, until you really look at what's been done within the structure, the financial structure of the organization, exactly what the potential value can be. And that's what we'll do, is if and when it's on the market, you get the opportunity to look at the books. You assess it with people who understand not only the finances of sports, but the financial industry, a sense of the times we're in right now, what the potential may be, but is that an actuality. And then there's probably going to be a bidding process and an auction.
Whatever it's worth, though, I mean, are you ready for that? I mean, where is the money coming from, whether it's $1.5 billion or $1 billion or $800 million?
Well, that's what we've been taking 2 years to accumulate. An investment fund that we feel will be able to allow us to be very aggressive and competitive.
You said something in that last answer, Dodger Stadium is 50 years old. Do you believe Dodger Stadium needs an upgrade?
Absolutely. We have a 5-point plan and a very good business plan, and our fans are going to be partners with us. And we believe that's one of the first steps, is to make a significant investment in refurbishing the stadium and bringing it up to 21st century technology and entertainment. I mean, we're far behind. If you look at those 2 electronic message boards, I mean, it's embarrassing not to have 2 new state-of-the-art or 1 large one in the middle. I mean, if you've ever seen Dodger Stadium or Yankee Stadium, there is 1 huge screen followed by 2 screens that are rectangles that really control most of the atmosphere of the stadium. They're great for advertising, they control the game, they control the music, they're great for replays. I mean, that's one of the first things you have to do. And from that point on, I mean, our goal would be 4 million people the first year.
And the second thing you got to do, Mr. New Dodger owner Steve Garvey, is take care.
We're moving quickly here.
Because things moving quickly, and this young
quicker
man,
than bankruptcy.
This young man, or these 2 young men, want to be taken care of. But first, of course, we're talking about Matt Kemp. Now, what do you do with Mr. Kemp? Because his agent Dave Stewart says he wants $200 million. Now, Mr. Owner Steve Garvey, what would you do with a Matt Kemp? 27 years of age, I think, just coming off of a Triple Crown type year or near Triple Crown type year. What do you do with Kemp? Do you say do it again and prove to me that you can have another year like you had this past year, or do you take care of him now?
Well, first of all, that's number 1.
That's number 1.
Number 1 is taking care of the talent infrastructure we have right now.
Kemp and
so
Kershaw.
That we have a base. Mm-hmm. And then the problem is timing right now. If this doesn't happen and a free agency class goes by us, we're going to have to be very, very creative and changing the dichotomy of the team, the talent on the team. It can be done, but it makes it more complicated because we're going to be very, very aggressive. Our philosophy is, people know us, they love us, they're going to have faith in us, our life is dedicated to them, and we're going to put the very best team on the field. But if we don't have the opportunity, it's going to slow down that timetable.
So what's he worth?
So what you
get to the
well,
bottom
I'm going to
line.
ask him, first of all, to take me to Morton's
of course.
to dinner, because he'll be able to afford it. Well, and then we're going to sit down. Now, who better to be able to sit down with Kemp and sit down with Kershaw, and I'm pretty sure we're going to want Loney back,
right,
and sit down with them and say, listen, things are going to change here. You are going to be part of something special. We are going to pay you what market value is. But more importantly, we are going to always be there for you. And you're going to tell us what you want. Not only dollars and cents. Tell us what you want in the clubhouse. Tell us what you need, and we're going to provide that. And I think that in every free agent, we're going to be able to go to their homes and tell them this is what we're going to do. Let the GM work it out. Work it out with your agent. But we want you to be part of something special because we think 4 million fans and hundreds of millions of others watching TV and listening to radio are going to come back and they're going to be the 10th man. But you're going to be the reason they're going to come back because that's what the Dodgers have always been about, the fans and the players.
Do you go after Pujols or Fielder? Answer that when we come back.
And also when we come back, Steve Garvey, Lunch with a Legend broadcast. There's something I've been wanting to ask you ever since the last time you and I talked, which was shortly after you had, Frank McCourt very suddenly relieved you of your duties earlier this year. You learned what can happen when somebody inside the organization speaks out against Frank McCourt. There are a lot of guys still in the organization that have not been able to speak out. I want to know what you think they actually think. if they had a chance to speak publicly. So all of that is coming up next. Steve Garvey on stage with us live at Morton's The Steakhouse in Woodland Hills. With Mychal Thompson, I'm Mark Willard. Much more all the way up till 1 o'clock with Steve Garvey on 710 ESPN.
Attention California homeowners. Are you struggling to make...
It's Lunch with a Legend on 710 ESPN.
LA Sports Leader 710 ESPN. Morton's The Steakhouse, Woodland Hills. We're hanging with a Dodger legend, a baseball great, and possibly a future Dodger owner. Steve Garvey on stage with Mychal Thompson. I'm Mark Willard. Right before we went to break, Mychal, you had an interesting question for Steve. Go ahead.
Something that all the Dodger fans would love to hear, because I'm from the old Lakers school, from Jerry Buss school, where Jerry Buss and the Lakers, his MO is the Lakers always should have a major star playing for the Lakers. This is Los Angeles, the entertainment capital of the world, and I always looked at the Dodgers and figures, why don't the Dodgers have a major star playing for them now? Maybe Matt Kemp's going to develop into that guy. Maybe Clayton Kershaw's going to develop into that guy. But right now, there are two guys out there in the free agent market who are major stars, and two of the best out there, and Albert Pujols and Prince Fielder. And I'm thinking, boy, the Dodgers should go after one of those guys. I mean, this is L.A. Bring a mega star like that here. Mm-hmm. And if you were in charge of the Dodgers, Steve Garvey, Mr. Owner, Mr. New Owner, which one of those guys would best be suited for the Dodgers in the future?
Well, it's a great question, and you do have emerging stars. You get stars that could be on the real big national stage, especially next year for Kemp and Kershaw. But what you really need to do, and you understand this, both of you do, this is the entertainment capital of the world. I mean, we need big stars, we need character, we need power. See, that's my philosophy. We need power. Power sells. Everybody loves a 3-hit, 1-0 game, but we really love 5 home runs.
I like 10 to 9. Yeah, I love those kind of games.
Well, you've got a son that's a rising baseball
like the other night,
star.
15 to 7, St. Louis, when Albert hit like 6 home runs out. Right. Man, are you kidding me? That's what you want to see.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now, the choice between the two is: do you want the real proven veteran who is really an international star in Pujols? That's probably going to cost you more, but let's throw away dollars and cents for now because you really want one of the two big guys. Or do you want a guy that's a little bit younger, 28, who probably you can get a longer contract for less money.
And he's got a great personality.
Great personality. He's going to have to shave the beard, but aside from that.
That's part of his personality.
Did you ever see a beard on Pee Wee Reese or Gil Hodges?
Oh, no.
Absolutely not.
You'd make like Brian, what's his name, up in San Francisco?
Yeah, the Beards won the World Series last year.
That's great. Look what happened to him. Beards get old, you know. We have a great young man here in the audience today. What's your name, son?
Luke?
Great. He's got a Dodger jersey on.
Number 12. Who's number 12?
Number 12? Yeah, Dusty Baker.
Dusty Baker,
friend.
that's right.
Yeah. You know, but that's what we want. We want to see all the kids wearing Dodger jerseys and T-shirts again, taking pride in it, wanting to be a Dodger someday. But who would I go? I'd go after Pujols first.
Pujols first.
I'd go after the megastar first, but pitch both of them. Continue to pitch both of them because it's going to come down to serious negotiations with agents who have a one-time opportunity to make a lot of money. Not the player, but the agent. So they're going to make it very difficult.
While we're on the subject of players, it's been kind of a bumpy little ride especially over the last year for Andre Ethier. What would you do with him?
Oh, I would keep him. I'd lock him up for another 4 or 5 years. I like him as a person. I like his attitude. We would talk about a few things in his offense and his approach. He plays a great right field. He's got a good, strong, accurate arm, and you know he's been injured a little bit. You got to remember that the times that he's been in slumps, basically he's had some type of hand or wrist injury, which for a hitter, it makes it very, very difficult. You don't understand unless you played the game. If you have a strained or a broken finger or a weak wrist, it really changes your approach to the game. Nowadays, I mean, every night you're facing 2 or 3 guys that throw over 90 miles an hour. So you have to be able to take that bat and create bat speed to be able to make contact. And if you're injured in any way with your arms or hands, it's a deterrent. So I trust him, and I would lock him up too.
Steve Garvey, our guest, Lunch with a Legend here on 710 ESPN. This next one's a little touchy, but I want to get back to it because of something you said earlier in the show. When you were talking about what you would want to do as owner, you put a little emphasis on fans being safe. They would feel safe at Dodger Stadium. The Brian Stowe incident this year, certainly not only got a lot of attention, but now there's a court case. The way that was handled by the McCourt regime, how much of the blame goes there, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, who would have ever thought that something like this would ever happen at Dodger Stadium? What people don't realize is 25 to 30 times a year there are incidents in the parking lot and in the stadium that force the police to become involved and are relatively serious. So what we have to do, number one, we have to bring permanent lighting to the parking lot. Number two, you have to feel safe and secure in your transition from your vehicle to getting inside the stadium. And then once you're inside the stadium, you have to really feel like you're home and that this is a family environment. And we would add more security. We would make it imperative that we start to change the atmosphere inside the stadium, an atmosphere that's inclusive of the Dodgers team and one that's respectful of our opponents. Take more time to cheer for your team and less time to be derogatory to other fans. I mean, it's a baseball game. It's entertainment. It's 2.5, 3 hours. You want to come there. You want great memories. I know when you take your son to Dodger, it's a memory that lasts forever. And I felt that way when my dad, Joe, took me on the bus and I was a bat boy. It changed my life completely. You talk to anybody my age or whatever about when they used to go there with their dads and their moms and the family. We have to bring that back so that people go there for that reason, to want to make that night special and part of the family bond.
These kinds of discussions, and I promised this question, earlier this year you spoke out about potentially being the next owner, and Frank McCourt the next day decided that you couldn't work for the Dodgers anymore. So what about guys who are stewing on this stuff who do still work for the Dodgers? I mean, Vin Scully, Tommy Lasorda, guys like that have not been able to say anything public. Have you spoken to them? What do you think they think about all this?
I can only speak for myself, but I really believe that those men that have dedicated their life and have been such a great part of Dodger history that we feel are synonymous with the Dodgers are very, very sad in what's happened. And I respect any of their decisions. My decision was to continue to work there, and we came to agreement as to what they wanted me to say and not say. And I said, listen, I could be working for GM, and said, boy, I'd like to buy GM, but it wasn't for sale. I'd like to buy Apple if I worked for them. What a great company, but it's not for sale. And I always said that the team's not for sale, but if it would go into I'd be interested in buying. I mean, that's pretty harmless, especially for a guy whose life has been a Dodger, basically. And what I did was I stayed there for the people that run the concession stands, because everybody was down. I mean, the spirit was down. To see them every day and say, don't worry, cheer for the team. How many times did I go on the radio and say, come and support the team? You're Dodger fans. Support these guys that are going out there and playing hard, these young guys who have to deal every day with the question is, what do you think about this? What do you think about that they shouldn't have to deal with? Right? So I stayed. Also, I brought millions of dollars in sponsorship there, right? I had my responsibility to take care of my advertisers there. I traveled over 300 miles, living out in Palm Desert, back and forth 6 hours to come to the stadium. Why? To interact with the fans, to talk to the kids, these young players in the dugout during batting practice about what this professional life is all about and what it takes and the patience you have to have and the need you have to be able to communicate with the press and the radio and television. People that need answers. It's the entertainment business. This is what you do. You have to communicate. The other night everybody got on Albert when, wasn't in the cutoff position, right? And he forgot for a minute the responsibility he had to the press and the fans just to answer the question. Yeah? He knows he didn't get there in time. He knows he didn't get the ball. But all you have to do is say it and admit it. What are we going to do? Chastise him? Okay, you admitted it. That's what we tell our kids. Just admit it. Don't lie. Just admit it.
Coming up next with Steve Garvey, how has the game changed and what needs to happen to make baseball, quote-unquote, cool again? Steve Garvey on stage with us at Morton's, the Steakhouse in Woodland Hills with Mychal Thompson. I'm Mark Willard, and this is LA Sports Leader, 710 ESPN. On LA Sports Leader, 710 ESPN with Mychal Thompson. I'm Mark Willard, and lunch with a legend today at Morton's, the Steakhouse in Woodland Hills is with Dodger great Steve Garvey. We do have a quick announcement, and that is, it is official in Major League Baseball. They have postponed, due to rain, Game 6 of the World Series. So as of now, although rain is in the forecast for tomorrow as well, Game 6 is rescheduled for tomorrow night in St. Louis. We will have that right here on 710 ESPN. Of course, you're home for all of the baseball playoffs. And you think of the baseball playoffs, Steve, for instance, and we see this every year in the World Series. The World Series will go up against a Monday night football game that's just kind of a random Week 7 game and struggle in the ratings. What needs to happen for baseball to be cool again?
Well, we beat Monday Night Baseball. I mean, football, right?
This year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all right. It's a start.
Okay.
Of course, the
It's like
NBA's
the worst
on
Monday night
strike.
football game of all time, I think,
That's
is
right.
why. But
Well, but it's the Rangers and the Cardinals. It's a Midwest area. But it's a start. It's I think what happens, and I think you and I agree the same thing, there's such a saturation in each sport that you take for granted that the games are going to be on. All of a sudden it gets to the fall. Football's in the air. Now you've got, you kind of take the playoffs a little bit for granted. It's interesting to watch. You get to the World Series, and all of a sudden now you got X number of Monday night football games. Unless you have a direct interest in the two teams, that Monday night's it's a legend. It's institutional in this country. So it was nice to see it, in the ratings. I even flipped over to the football game, and it was really bad.
it was terrible.
I was watching.
That was a no-hitter.
I was watching Monday Night Raw wrestling.
Don't even go there.
I bet you I wasn't the only one either.
Michael just embarrassed himself in front of hundreds here in Woodland Hills. Go
Let me
ahead,
ask you a question about this, the so-called shortest infield in the history of baseball, according to Jay Johnstone.
Who said that?
Jay Johnstone over there called you guys the shortest infield in the history of baseball. Say, Russell, Garvey, and Lopes. Arguably, and I agree with you, arguably the greatest infield in the history of the game. But what was the secret to that? You guys played together 8 years and had so much success. What was the secret to you guys' success? And I got another second part to this question.
Okay, part A was the secret of the success was I had such a bad arm throwing from third that Alston didn't know what to do with me. And all of a sudden it's 1973, and Ron Say comes up, and I had a shoulder separation at Michigan State in spring football my freshman year, and it wasn't a full separation; it was partial, but I never threw quite the same. So now I'm really developed as a hitter, but I'm a wild arm third baseman and play a couple games in left field in the beginning of the year. But Say is playing third, and there's no position for me. And I start pinch hitting, and as the 24th guy on the team, you pinch hit when your starters let up 8 runs in the first inning, and you bring somebody in, and you pinch hit for them in the third. But one thing leads to another. I'm leading the National League in pinch hitting on June 23rd of 1973. And I got a pinch hit against Freddie Norman, a little lefty in Cincinnati, in the first game of a doubleheader. And I'm sitting in my locker having a turkey sandwich, and all of a sudden, Walt Olson comes by, and he said, "You ever play first?" And I looked at him, and I said, "Oh, absolutely." Well, I played one game in Little League and one game with a bad hamstring in AAA.
Well, you didn't lie.
But, if I hadn't have said absolutely, he probably would have gone and gotten somebody else, another right-handed hitter, because we were struggling against lefties. But I said, absolutely. He said, well, get a glove, you're starting. He said, don't trip over the bag, get a couple hits, and let's beat this lefty. They had another lefty. So I went out that night and picked one out of the dirt, and caught the ball, didn't trip over the bag, got 2 doubles. And after the game, I'm sitting there, and he came by, and he said, not bad, kid, you're in there tomorrow. And that was the beginning, that night, June 23rd of 73, of Say and Russell and Lopes and Garvey, and lasted 8.5, almost 9 years.
Arguably the greatest infield in history, but is it a better infield than Rodriguez, Jeter, Cano, and Teixeira?
Well, it is because.
Well, I want to know.
From diehard Yankee fan Mychal Thompson.
Well,
Go
they
ahead
are-
and
they
answer
are
that
pretty
question.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got to remember, what were they together? A couple years?
Yeah, about a
2
couple.
years?
Yeah.
And how do you measure greatness?
Well, of course, hitting, the fielding, the chemistry, all that stuff is involved.
How about world
Titles.
how about
Well,
world
they-
championships?
They've only won one.
World Champ.
Together, that forced them.
But my feeling is, and this is how I measure greatness, is that he or she was good for so long, it became great. You can become stars. You can have a great season. How we'll measure Kershaw and Kemp is over the next 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, as far as greatness is concerned. So I may take those guys for a year or two, but I'll take those. What do you call them? Penguins and
Penguins.
the miniature guys of Garvey, Russell, Say, and Lopes over a decade, and just
Pygmies.
look what we produced.
Steve, last thing for you.
No, I got something too.
It's been a difficult time. Well, here.
I got to ask them
You
this.
could look at this.
Oh, forget
then.
the
Here.
time. We got Steve
It's
Garvey
got to
here.
go. No.
Short answers.
Well, fine. I won't say last thing. Michael might have some. I want to know, though, at this time, with everything that's going on with the Dodgers, what's your message to the fans?
Message for the fans is you've had a certain amount of patience. Continue to have the patience. There is hope. We feel the team will eventually be sold. Starting next Monday through next week in the Delaware courts, I think will be very insightful. The
has been
decision
delayed a little bit, just to let you know. It's been delayed another month. Sorry to break that news to you.
Okay. Well, when that happens, we still feel that the judge is leaning towards understanding this great game of baseball, understanding that at this point in time, this ownership is irreparable, that there needs to be a change for the sake of the game, for the sake of Dodger fans everywhere, and for the sake of baseball. I mean, you need the Dodger franchise to be viable in baseball and in sports.
And lastly for you, Steve, we would do you and your career a disservice if we did not say that you belong in the Hall of Fame. 1,207 consecutive games. I mean, this is ridiculous. 2,599 hits, hit over 300 in the playoffs. It's got to irk you a little bit because it bothers me that you're not introduced as Hall of Famer Steve Garvey. How do you feel about it?
Well, I wish you could vote.
No, I'd vote you.
I'm on the veterans ballot. Yes. They'll vote again December of next year. God willing, at that time, there'll be more of a feeling of inclusion. There's probably 5 guys in my category that legitimately could go in, and I have hope. I always have hope. I'm an optimist. My career is more of a body of work, and if you take time to look at it, then I think, as you did, you'll say, it deserves to be in. Hopefully.
You mentioned it. You're not far off. You need 12 out of the 16 votes, and last year you got 8, right? Okay, so Mychal, you just got 4 guys to go convince. That's it, and Steve Garvey's in. Steve Garvey, everybody. Everybody just had lunch with a legend.
It's been wonderful. Thanks.
Dodger, great. Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure. Want to thank our sponsors as well: Farmers, AT&T, the Real Yellow Pages, Comerica Bank, and Just Tires. More to come with myself and Mychal Thompson. Should Matt Barkley go pro? Should he not? Coming up, and a little bit more of a preview of the Stanford SC game coming up this weekend on 710 ESPN.